You are now listening to the Dual Position Podcast.
The boys are back to talk all things SuperCoach all season long.
Please welcome your hosts, Whisperer and Brew.
Broncos done in the books. Moving on to today's topic, the Canberra Raiders, who, in all honesty, could be anything come 2022. It's very hard to place them, very hard to sort of do any kind of analysis on them. It's nowhere near as in detail as the Broncos, who are a side on the rise. Off the bat, I've basically got the Raiders very similar to where they were last year. I feel like they've made a couple of okay off-season signings, some that I probably wouldn't have made. I don't feel it strengthens the side a whole lot, but we'll touch on that on today's episode. You're listening to the Dual Position Podcast. I am your host, the SC Whisperer, joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Brew. Mate, between now and Monday, how you been?
Yeah, not too bad. My work schedule's changed this week, so we're recording a lot earlier than we normally would. And my body clock's a bit out of whack. I'm used to being a very early morning starter, and I'm doing afternoon shift this week because of Australia Day. Happy Australia Day to everyone out there. Canberra Raiders. I'm going to say that this is probably the hardest 17 to pick. I really struggled here. There's a few asterisks I've got on my spreadsheet here because it could go either way. So it's going to be an interesting chat.
Yeah, when we jump into the 17s, I haven't looked at yours, you haven't looked at mine. We could be different. Here's hoping we are. We have something to discuss. But on the surface of things, the Raiders, look, they went to 10-14 last year. They finished in 10th. They actually weren't too bad away from home. They went 6-6 away from home, so a perfect 500. At home is where they struggled, only winning 4 games, losing 8. They were competitive, though, overall in the whole season. They scored 481 points, which ranked them 10th, so they averaged about 20 points a game. Defensively, they conceded 578. They ranked 9th, which is 24 points a game. So a 4-point differential, basically, on averages for the season. So definitely there or thereabouts. They probably lost some games they should have. They've won some games they maybe shouldn't have. That's kind of the story for these sides that are anywhere from 8th to 12th, similar to where we see the Broncos being this year, as we touched on Monday. So, look, the Raiders, they're a hard one. Their draw to start the season, the Sharks at home, the Cowboys away, the Titans at home, Manly away, and Melbourne at home. So out of that first 5, I could see them maybe giving the Sharks a bit of a run. The Sharks maybe not gelled fully come round 1 with some off-season signings. It might take them a little bit to hit the ground running. The Cowboys, you'd think they get the job done against the Cowboys. The Titans, probably got the Titans coming out on there, and then Manly and Melbourne, I've got those 2 winning against the Raiders. So I guess if we're being optimistic, they may be 2-3 out of the first 5 rounds, beating the Sharks and the Cowboys, but I guess that'll depend on how the Sharks come out with their new side, and especially the same with the Titans as well. They've got a new spine, so a few good games to watch there if you're a Raiders fan. They finished 10th last year, mate. I've got them bang average in 10th again this year.
I've got them in 11th. I've got them either starting a 0-5 or a 1-4. I don't see them winning. I don't think they'll beat the Sharks. I won't be tipping them against the Sharks. Probably the Cowboys, you would assume. Is that game home or away?
No, it's up in North Queensland, so I guess
see that, yeah.
could be 0-5.
Yeah, so for me, I think eventually they'll find their feet, but they've got a lot of new combinations. I've got pretty much their entire spine different this year, so I think it might take time for them to get gelling, get things together. Very solid forward pack. Maybe 1 or 2 big names, and then a lot of solid, strong bodies. So I think they'll muscle up well. Just not sure about how the backline will flow to start the season.
Yeah, look, when it comes to our round 1 sides, I've named the side that I think will get named, not the side that I want to get named. The side that I want to get named is very different to what I think will actually get named, but they've had a few ins, they've had a lot of outs. They've gained Jamal Fogarty from the Gold Coast Titans, they've gained Peter Holler from the Cowboys, they've gained Adam Elliott and Nick Cottridge, both from the Bulldogs as well. When it comes to the losses column, George Williams, we know he's gone to Warrington, Ryan James off to Brisbane, as we touched on previous episode, Havili off to the Rabbitohs, Caleb Aikens off to the UK, Bailey Simonson off to Parramatta, C.S. Oliola is retired, and Curtis Scott, Dynamis Louis, and Darby Medlin have all been released. Another key thing to note, Josh Hodgson also going to Parramatta in 2023. So similar to the Jermaine Asako thing, that could play a role in how they use him this year. Come round 1, I don't really think it's changing a whole lot, but same thing as the Broncos, mate. The gains with Fogarty, Holler, Elliott, and Cottridge, you excited by any 4 of those?
I'm excited by Adam Elliott coming to the club. I've actually got him as probably the biggest asset if he's named where I believe he'll be named. If he's on the bench, then that would change things. I quite like the pickup of Fogarty myself. I know you don't love it. I think he'll go quite well down there. The others, Kotrick's. Well, he's a former Origin player, so he's a good player. But have we already seen the best of him? We don't know.
Yeah, when it comes to the losses, there's not many that stick out to me here. They're pretty. The Raiders are pretty stacked at wings. So Bailey Simonson leaving is no skin off my nose. Ryan James, I guess, just for the experience, and they did look a different side with George Williams in the side. So hopefully Fogarty can provide that bit of control that maybe Sam Williams didn't do. Look, I think Fogarty will have a good season. I just thought that you could have probably spent the money elsewhere until I know what Fogarty's on. It's hard to really comment, but you can't fault any of the recruitment. No huge names, but they haven't done any terrible business, in my opinion. I really like Adam Elliott, and if Nick Kotrick can find, I guess, how he was playing at the Raiders a couple of years ago, he could be anything. Injuries and suspensions, the Raiders are clear, so they get to name their best 17 come round one. All things fingers crossed with trials. We don't want to see players get injured, so at the moment, no injuries, no suspensions. They should be good for round one. Coming into round one, we'll go over the backline, mate. Chance Nickel-Kluckstar at fullback. There's been a bit of talk about Xavier Savage playing there and Chance moving into the centres. I just can't see it. Chance, look, didn't play good footy last year, but was injured for a large part of it. Go back to 2020 and 2019. He was one of their best players, and I really don't see a young rookie, Xavier Savage, coming in and taking the fullback jersey off Chance straight away.
So we'll start with these two players. I've got an asterisk both next to both of these players, where what they do here basically determines a lot of the backline. So I listed Chance at 1, and I got Savage on the wing in 2. I personally think Savage is going to be picked at fullback, and Klokstad's probably going to move to the centre, which will shuffle my lineup. But for now, common sense says that they would start the season, I think, with Klokstad still in the 1. And I think Savage will start on the wing. I think shortly after it will change. Savage will move to fullback, and Klokstad will end up in the centres,
I don't even have Savage in my 17, so interesting. On the wings, I have Nick Kotrick and Jordan Rapana. I just don't see why they bring Kotrick back, one of Ricky Stuart's boys, without playing him. I think Xavier Savage just sits the pine and waits for his turn. I'd love for him to get named on the wing, because with these new rule changes, if he plays a certain amount of games on the wing, they'll change his position to come round 6, so we'll be able to get him at centre wing eligibility, despite only being fullback only right now. But yeah, I've got Chance at 1, Kotrick at 2, Rapana at 3, no Savage in my side. I've got Seb Chris in one of the centre spots, and this is basically what I was alluding to when I said that I think this side will be picked. I don't want this side to be picked, but I've got Jared Croker in the other centre spot. His time is coming up very, very shortly. It's Matt Tomoko's time to shine. Or even if they move Chance to the centres and play Savage at fullback. But Jared Croker, he's been a wonderful servant for the Raiders, been a wonderful servant for the NRL. But the time is coming now where surely we've got to think about moving him on.
He's not in my 17.
Yeah,
so he's my bigger mission.
As much as I'd love to see that, I just don't see Ricky Stuart dropping him. And that's the thing. Like, this side is the one that I think will be named, not the one that I want to be. If I was picking my want 17, Croker's not there. I just don't see Ricky dropping him round 1.
Look, I think the writing was on the wall last season. Whether or not he does it, I'm not sure. But it's Ricky Stuart. Like, we know what he's done with the forwards. Why would he not start doing it with the backs if they're not performing? That's why I think there might be a bit of a shake-up. I have Chance at fullback, as I said, to start the season with Savage on the wing. I've then got Nick Kotrick and Matt Tomoko in the centres, and obviously Rapana on the other wing. He's pretty locked in there for me. But I think down the road, what you'll find is that Kotrick will move to the wing, Chance will go into the centre slot, and Savage will play fullback. And I would think by rounds, probably 5 or 6, that's going to be the back 7, because obviously White and Fogarty speak for themselves. But that's why I said I've got a completely new spine happening here, basically.
Yeah, and you've gone Tomoko over Seb Chris. I like that. I like Tomoko. I just think Ricky picked Seb Chris. That's my only thing. And that's the same thing. If I was picking my 17, I'd put Tomoko there. I'm just trying to understand what Ricky's doing, but then again, no one understands what Ricky's doing. So
that's why this was hard.
Yeah,
this was very hard. Like, straight off the bat, our back vibes are completely different. And I have a feeling our front row and second rows might be quite different too. So who knows? I think the Raiders is the biggest lottery going in. Of all the sides that we're going to name, I feel like this is absolutely the hardest one to name.
6 and 7 wasn't hard to name. Jack White and Jamal Fogarty. Nothing.
Speaks for itself,
nothing really to say there. Now, by the sounds of it, you've picked Tom Starling at 9.
I have, but that's with an asterisk because obviously he's got his legal problems. I just think with Hodgson leaving the club, it's time to bring Starling up, reverse the roles. Hodgson plays in the 14 and Starling takes over the reins as the 9. Decision pending, obviously, with what they're going to do because he's a bit of a nutcase and keeps getting in trouble with the law. If he's out, I'd have to do some research to think who would come into the side and play a utility type role. But for now, I'll go with what I believe is the best, and that is Starling starting in the 9 and Hodgson filling in from the bench.
Now, as everyone knows, I am Harry Grant's number 1 fan. You can't talk me off him. But if you told me Tom Starling was playing 80 minutes, I'd be running Starling and Randall, and I'd forego Harry Grant. I just don't see that happening. I've got Josh Papali'i and Joe Tarpany as the props with Josh Hodgson at 9. As much as I'd love to see Tom Starling start, I think Ricky, after the season they had last year, he's just going to go back to the reliable old heads and get them off to a good start. Then maybe make some change if it doesn't go well. But Papali, Hodgson, and Tarpany are my middlemen.
So I've got, Papali'i speaks for himself. There is an argument that he could come off the bench as he did at times last season, but I think to start the season, you pick your best people. So I've actually got Papali'i in the 8, and I've got Ryan Sutton starting in the 10.
Interesting. Don't hate.
Yeah,
don't
I
hate
told
that.
you mine would be different.
Yeah, I don't hate that. Ryan Sutton offers a lot, and who knows what's going to happen with Joe Tarpany. We saw his missus come out and flame Ricky Stuart on Instagram last year, so there could be a little bit of tension there. Don't really want to speculate too hard, but yeah, there could be a world where Ryan Sutton plays. I mean, they've got a couple of other guys that can fill in the front row as well. My back row, mate, Hudson Young and Elliot Whitehead. What about yourself?
I've got Elliot Whitehead. He speaks for himself. He'll definitely be on one of the edges. I've still got Harawira Naira in the 12. I think he did enough when playing last season to have earned the role, but he did end up getting hooked at the back end of last season.
That's what scares me.
That's for defensive reasons. So again, it's another asterisk situation. Does Hudson Young get the edge? Does Corey Horsburgh come into it? So for now, I've gone with what I think is the best 2. So I've gone Whitehead, Harawira Naira as the edge back rowers.
I think Corey Harawira Naira is a better player than Hudson Young. I'm just trying to put myself in the mind of Ricky, as I was saying, and him getting hooked at the back end of last year because of poor defense. I just worry that he gives it to Young to start the season, and Corey just drops price on the bench, which is great because if he ever picks up another spot in the starting side, we saw how lethal he was for SuperCoach last year. So I've got Hudson Young, Elliot Whitehead. You've got Corey Harawira Naira, Elliot Whitehead. And at 13, I am 99.9% sure we have the same person, and that is Adam Elliott.
Yeah. I've got Elliot playing at lock, and I've got him as their biggest asset this year. I think he'll do wonderful things if he does get the starting lock position there. There is certainly other people that can play lock for the club. Tarpany being one of those people, I believe could play in the lock position, but I've got him on my bench. Outside of that, there's rumours that Horsburgh could play lock, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, whether or not Elliot has to earn his place, start off the bench, and then maybe take it over during the season. It's a possibility. I just like what Elliot does in the middle, and I think he will be a good defensive asset. He runs fairly good lines. He's underrated from an attacking point of view. He's coming from a very poor Bulldog side who couldn't create very well. I think the Raiders will have much more of an attacking prowess, obviously, than the Dogs have in years past. So I've got Elliot to start the season. I think they brought him to the club for a reason, and I think that is to give them a bit of stability in the lock position.
Yes, obviously our bench is going to be a little bit different because we've had some different starters. My bench is Starling at 14, Horse, CHN, and Ryan Sutton on the bench.
We've effectively got the same 17 players bar Savage. So I've got Hodgson, and you've got Starling, obviously. I've got Young, Horsburgh, Tarpany, and you have them in, I believe, other positions, starting roles. So, yeah, so the 17s are the same. I've got Peter Holler as the first man in. There is a world where I can see if Harawira Naira is not named to start on the edge, that he doesn't make the 17 at all, and Holler plays off the bench instead.
Yeah, I'm a huge Peter Holler fan. I think he suits the modern 13 really well. I've said this since about 2019 when he was at the Cowboys, I want to say. Yeah, really, really liked him. Just never got the opportunity with Lolo there. I don't think he's going to get the opportunity that I thought he may have presented a couple of years ago, but he's still a very safe hand. A man that we haven't mentioned either, Emre Gula. He's definitely in consideration to nab a bench spot as well. Just another big body that Ricky seems to like playing. He was starting at parts of last season and could fill that Ryan James role that, has left the club. Really interesting,
Definitely.
mate. Sorry, what was that?
I said definitely. The Emre Gula, they've got a young fella called Harry Rushton. They've got Trey Mooney. They've got quite a few people that are there or thereabouts. So there could be some potential over the course of the season that we do get some cheapies that come through this club, particularly if there's injury or if, Ricky gets his knives out and starts rotating and dropping players left, right and centre. So it's going to be really interesting to see what their team is come round one.
At time of recording, no Raiders player is owned by more than 2% of teams apart from Xavier Savage with 5%. So it shows you how little the public is on Raiders assets when no one is higher than 2% apart from Savage, who is less than 300k playing fullback. So that's
interesting.
Yeah, it's very, very. It's funny how the public perceive the teams. And when I was doing,
how much is Elliott off the top of your head? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I think he averaged like 55 last year, so he'd be about 530. I'm curious as to how close he is.
I feel like if he's named to start the season, I think his numbers could definitely boost up. There's a lot of blokes in that kind of scoring range.
We'll touch on all
range.
the studs, duds / traps, X factors, and cheapies. It wasn't as easy as doing the Broncos. This was very tough. When it comes to studs, I've only got one in Jordan Rapana at 554k, centre wing fullback. I think he led the league in tackle bust last year, and that's over a guy like Brian To'o when it comes to centre wing. So look, he just keeps scoring tries. He keeps racking up attacking stats. Doesn't matter who he's playing with. Rapana is the shining light in this Raider side, and he always seems to get good scores. 554, he's more than Staggs. He's more than Aitken. He's less than To'o. He's in that sort of awkward price bracket. If you did start with Rapana, I don't hate it. I just think the draw doesn't... Look, if the Raiders had the Warriors draw, I could definitely see a world where people start with Rapana. But the fact that you and I are predicting them to go 2 and 3 at best, with the likelihood of them being 1 and 4 or even 0 and 5 after the first 5 rounds, kind of puts me off any Raiders back.
Yeah, I think his numbers are skewed somewhat from his time at fullback as well. So we all know what type of player he is, what he has been, what he can be. He's still young enough to perform, but the price-wise, it just kind of rules him out of consideration for me. Yeah,
the draw doesn't help that either. Apart from studs, mate, I don't have any other studs in this Raiders side, and that includes Josh Papali'i. In the duds column or the trap column, I've literally just listed the words the entire Raiders forward pack because I cannot trust Ricky Stuart to save myself. Like he has such a quality, like that forward pack that we listed before is quality. One of the best in the comp, I'd say, on paper. But it just doesn't click. Ricky doesn't seem to get them working. And then 2 or 3 bad performances and they're dropped. And I can't play roulette when it comes to SuperCoach trades and Ricky Stuart.
There's a real inconsistency of the minutes as well. And, the constant shuffling, like Papali's named to start and then suddenly he's coming off the bench and he's playing like an impact player. It's too much like it's Russian roulette basically with your SuperCoach side. And that's not how I like to play the game. So for me, there's quite a few guys there. Like I know Harawira Naira, I've been a big fan of picking him in the past, but there's too many question marks. His price isn't fantastic to start the season. Elliott I quite like. I could see him coming into my side to start the season. He's 489. I had a look. That's a fair price point. Someone like him or a Carrigan, if named lock to start the season, if you do want a Cleary or, even a Turbo, for example, you're going to need guys like that who can, average, say 60 to 65. They might not get your Madison Crichton for feeder type scores, but they'll be a solid plug to allow you to have the captaincy option in one of the two people I just spoke about. So I feel like their numbers could rise. In terms of the biggest trap, you said the forward pack. I literally listed starting 9. Whoever that is a trap for me. I just feel like the minutes probably won't be too consistent. There'll be games where Hodgson, plays 30 or 35 off the bench, and there'll be games where Starling plays 60 to 70 minutes starting, and I just don't know if I'll be able to rely on that. The old Ricky factor. So for me, whoever starts 9's a trap.
Looking way too far in the future, Tom Starling has to be one of the most owned players at the start of next year, surely.
If it's his role and we get more of a, I don't know, even like a rookie comes in and takes over the bench position, then yeah, absolutely, it's possible. But I'm not looking forward that far at the moment.
Always looking forward. So yeah, duds, I've just listed the entire Raiders forward pack. I can't look at any of them. People have messaged me about Hudson Young, Joe Tarpany, Ryan Sutton. I don't care if they're named to start. I just can't go near them. It's just way too... It'll be great. You'll buy someone like a Hudson Young, he'll get named to the back row, he'll get 65 for the first 2 weeks, and you're thinking, oh, how good is this? It's not like picking a Josh Jackson from last year. Like, Josh Jackson's playing 65 minutes, whether they lose 50-0 or they win 50-0. Like, he's the staple head of that Bulldogs pack last year, whereas someone like you hit the nail on the head, someone like a Josh Papali'i, like a guy that we expect to be like the role model and like the big leader in this forward pack. Ricky's like, you know what? Might just drop you.
Yeah, you had a poor game. I'm going to send you to Reggie's and see if you want to come back or not. And that's the problem. And I just think it creates somewhat of a poor culture. Ricky's got a long history of clubs, and he's been sacked or moved on from multiple clubs, including top-end clubs like the Roosters and the Eels and whatnot. And I just think that there's a pattern there. He's very passionate about what he does. Arguably, maybe he's too passionate because it disrespects the players at times, and it's just a real worry for me. What you were saying about Jackson's kind of how I feel about Adam Elliott this year. I feel like he could be that consistency in the pack, and I could take a risk there. Sutton doesn't have enough upside for me. Whitehead is the same. Whitehead will have great games where he scores 2 or 3 tries on the edge, and then he'll just have his other games where he just plods out of 50. Horsburgh's not for me. He's too much of a wildcat. Tarpany, I've always called him Trappany for years now, years and years and years, and I still think that's the case.
Because he'll go on a month of he'll go on 4 scores of 85, and then another month of 27s,
and then everyone will jump on him, and then bam, he'll plot out a couple of 40s and 50s, and next minute he's playing off the bench, and it does my head in. So I'm just going to avoid it. Yeah.
So basically, any Raiders forward, Brew and I are advising you to stay away from, and I think that shows why no one is more than 2% owned. I think it just shows that people are now starting to click on. You even see obviously the public make a few weird choices, but it's funny that when 150,000 people or whatever it is are also clicking onto the idea of maybe we don't go this Raiders pack because there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and you've got a nutcase and a head coach who doesn't play someone consistently, which for the NRL could be cool. You'll get continual rotation. Teams find it hard to line up against. You always get a response out of your players. But for SuperCoach, I just want the boring, same 13, week in, week out to make our lives all the more easier. I've got 3 X factors here. One of them is Tom Starling, just from the sheer fact that we're just hoping Josh Hodgson decides to go, you know what, might just go somewhere else for 12 months. Don't think it's happening. I'm just really keen on Starling. If he plays 65 minutes, I don't think that happens, though. I've also included Nick Cottridge, 376k. I guess we're just hoping that he gets back to what he can. I mean, this Raiders side doesn't really excite me. The mood on this podcast probably isn't as high as others, just because this section was hard to fill out.
It was very much so. I actually quite like the Nick Cotric call. I know the draws here or there, but the other thing is teams don't start the season the way that they finish the season. Sometimes teams come out of the blocks hot and they beat top sides, and we're like, where did this come from? So I don't hate that. The Raiders certainly on paper are a team that could do that. They could come out flying and we could look like assholes. And we've said, Norton 5, 1 and 4, 2 and 3, and they could come out and be 4 and 1. We don't know. So I don't hate the call. He's fairly priced. He's a former Origin player. I wouldn't say he's a former SuperCoach gun, but he's always been there or thereabouts. He has the tackle busting ability, can certainly break the line. I don't hate that call. So there is an X factor about him, and I wouldn't shoot down anyone that says, hey, I'm going to take a smoky and take Kotrick. I saw a side this morning with Moses Sully in it. I'd much prefer to take Kotrick over Moses Sully.
That was another point I was going to make. I was on Adrianasaurus podcast last night. We were doing the Tigers preview, and it just brought into my mind, would we rather, if I can speak, would we rather take a punt on Kotrick at 376 or take a punt on Noffa at 440?
Noffa. I'd take Noffa. Only because I know the Tigers' draw is not too bad.
All season long, basically.
He's going to very much need to prove himself to hold his position this year.
All right, so 5/8 podcast. Let's cast our mind back. What was it, 2 weeks ago? We mentioned Dylan Brown, and he seems to be picking up a bit of traction. I also mentioned Jack White. His traction has not changed. It has not picked up. I'm going to bring him up again. 412K with I was going to say a good half inside of him. He also had George Williams. He didn't really do a whole lot with George Williams. Can Jack Whiten get back to a 60 average with Jamal Fogarty, a controlling half, next to him?
No.
Okay, then.
Yeah, it's a firm no for me. Like, Toby Sexton's, a couple of bucks more. I take Sexton.
I'm not letting this Jack Whiten agenda go down, by the way. I'm going to keep forcing until someone takes him.
Braden Trindle, if named to start in the 7, obviously we don't know if he's going to start. We don't know if it's going to be Moylan and Hines, or we don't know if it's going to be Trindle and Hines. So if Trindle is the man and he gets that starting spot, I guarantee he will average more than Jack Whiten over the first 6 weeks. No
doubting that whatsoever. I'm trying to increase this 2% ownership on the Raiders side, because that's really depressing to look at.
You might need to get a new new co-host for Jack Whiten episode, because I'll do nothing but bash him. I don't think he's that talented. I think he's overrated. I think he's been found out a little bit last year when it was his job to step up and take control of that team. He folded like a house of cards. I just don't think he's the guy, to be honest with you.
Clive Churchill medalist in a losing side, apparently, somehow.
Listen, don't get me started on that, okay? Otherwise, we're going to have to put some explicit language warnings on this podcast.
Trying to trigger the Roosters fan. Mate, is there any other X factors that you're looking at in this Raiders side? Because for me, I'm not.
100%. Xavier Savage.
I've got him as a cheapie. I was going to touch on him next, but if you want to put him here now, go for it.
He's phenomenal. He is. I thought he would have played a lot more football for the club last year. It seems like for me, it sounds like he's in that side. If they're talking about this guy taking the fullback slot off Klokstad, who's been a very fine addition to that club, he's done nothing wrong whatsoever besides getting injured, then they must have an eye on this kid as being a big future of the club. So for me, with the hype that big and the fact that he hasn't just come out of the blue as a bloke that could start on the wing, he's come out of the blue as a bloke that could start fullback, and ironically was only given the fullback option on SuperCoach. Now, I know that they talk to the clubs and they say, look, what about this guy? What about this guy? And try and get a gauge. For me, the club has said this guy's a fullback. And that, to me, suggests that I will not be surprised whatsoever if round 1 comes along and Savage is their number 1.
No,
they just roll with this.
That's my point. We fast forward to, the 7th of March, which is Seamless Tuesday, I'm pretty sure, 6th of March, whatever. Xavier Savage is named at fullback. Can we viably pick him? Because he is only fullback, which is awful. If he was fullback centre wing, line up, but is it worth a 286k fullback to go Cleary, Haas, Grant for feeder?
You could chuck Munster in there and I still say no. The reason I say no is Savage debuting at fullback, 100%, he's going to make some money. But he's not going to score 120 or 150 off the bat. Highly, highly unlikely. He'd have to be an absolute superstar of Trebojevic Tedesco nature, and that's not going to happen.
Do you want to know what the ideal plan is? The ideal SuperCoach plan is the Raiders name Chance at fullback for the first 5 weeks. They name Savage on the wing. Come round 6, SuperCoach do their first position changes. Someone messaged me before wanting us to talk about the rule changes, but I feel like every podcast has spoken about the rule changes, so there's no real need for us to delve into it too deep.
That might be a podcast in itself where we talk about some tactics with the 5-round boosts.
Basically, in the shorter things, players can now have their positions upgraded throughout the year. So in a perfect world, Xavier Savage starts on the wing, plays there for 5 weeks, gets his centre wing status, so he goes fullback centre wing. The Raiders go 0-5 like Brew has predicted, and Ricky Stuart tears the book up. They put Xavier Savage at fullback. We get him at centre wing. He wouldn't have made a whole lot of money if they're going 0-5. We may be buying him for 300k. Then we go 300k fullback playing for the Raiders. That'd be the perfect scenario, but I agree with you, mate. I just do not see a world where we can pick him at fullback. Because you and I are both very set on the 2 guns. The only avenue we would deviate from that is Jaden Campbell or Reece Walsh. But that's the lowest I'd go, and I wouldn't go any lower than that, and I especially wouldn't go as low as Xavier Savage.
It's a bridge too far if you think about it. If you're starting Savage and you're putting Turbo beside him, maybe, because at least you've got the high, priced guy. But for example, if you went Teddy or Paps beside Savage, you're then looking at $1 million gap between getting, he's not going to make $1 million. Like best case scenario with a guy like Savage is he probably jumps up to 500k, and then you're probably still only halfway to Turbo if he does start poorly in inverted commas, because him dropping to $1 million, he's still going to be averaging probably 95 to 100. So you've lost the points, you've lost the captain points. Sure, you've made money, but to what a go? What's your rank without that guy? And that's what for me it comes down to. Unless he gets the center upgrade before Team List Tuesday, he's not an option for me.
And I don't think he will.
Even if he does what you said and starts fullback and then gets the eligibility, by then I almost think it's going to be a bridge too far. Like fullback's one thing, but if he's only making, say, 100k and knocking up to, say, a 400k or a 450k player, I don't know if it's something I'd still do. I'd probably look elsewhere.
Yeah, the only way that I pick Savage in my side is if he starts on the wing for the first month and a bit and then gets upgraded. Any other X factors we want to talk about?
No, not particularly. Don't get me wrong, I like Matt Tomoko. I owned him for a bit last year. I think he's a solid player, but as a SuperCoach option, I don't think that you're really going to be making a lot of money. I don't think he's going to be scoring in the same areas as the elite guys. It wouldn't surprise me, if a young or even a Harawira Naira, if they went on a tear to start the season on the edge, come out of the blocks and get a couple of 80s and 90s and then become the buzz before round 3. But to be honest with you, I'm not really expecting that at all. Savage is the guy I've mostly got my eye on, but I need that dual eligibility.
I think that's gonna wrap it up for the Raiders. I'm not gonna ramble on stuff. There's no point us talking about players that are not in consideration. Guys like Jared Croker as well. Like he's at a good price. He was at a good price. He was at a good price 7 years ago, but now I'm just not going near him when I think his time is coming to a close. Just to round things out, Brew has the Raiders in 11th. I have them in 10th. We're both pretty keen on Nick Cottridge. We are both pretty keen on no one else. Apart from the forwards, stay away from the forwards at all costs, in my opinion. That's going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for listening. Do a bit of housekeeping. Like, subscribe, leave a review, comment. Brew and I are generally in the comments for the YouTube videos quite often, and I read every review that comes through, good or bad. So really appreciate the support. Hopefully you've enjoyed the Raiders podcast. We'll be back on Friday with the Bulldogs, I'm pretty sure. I feel like
the Dogs, and I'm looking forward to
I feel like
I think it's going to be a good chat.
The mood for the Bulldogs chat is going to be a lot higher than what it has been today. A side on the up, similar to the Broncos, a side with a lot of assets to talk about, a side with a lot of ins and a lot of outs that we can discuss as well. So really excited for that one. Join us 6 o'clock on Friday. As always, thank you for listening. Bye for now.
Hooroo, guys. Hooroo.
Hooroo. Bye.